we turn to Senator Grassley, and I think it'll be Senator Kaine after that.
Mr. Pinto, when President Biden was still running for president, his campaign released a plan in July that promised to build 2 million homes in 5 years. 2 months later, the Harris campaign proposed roughly the same plan, but now promised to build 3 million homes and now do that in 4 years instead of 5 years. Mr. Pinto, the home building industry already builds over 1 million homes each year. Is the industry able to roughly double its production and meet these expectations, in addition to whether or not the housing supply increase is attainable? What is the impact of the housing market and on the economy of the Harris plan to offer subsidies of $25,000 down payment windfall?
Thank you, Senator Grassley. So in 2023, there were about 1.4 million building permits, housing starts for both single family and multifamily. And if you think about the 3 million over 4 years, you would be starting out at a smaller number. You'd probably end in the 4th year with about 1 million. So you'd be taking the 1.4 million up to about 2.4 million at the end of 4 years. That's commensurate with the increase, as I said in my testimony, that occurred from 1969 after the 1968 Housing Act was passed to 1972. And the results of running things up so quickly with all the subsidies that accompanied it and the loose lending was disastrous. So I think that's one scenario. The temptation will be to then loosen lending at the same time, which will lead to disastrous results. In terms of the home builders being able to handle that, I think it would be very difficult. But again, what happens when you throw all that money out, you end up with a lot of corruption. And there's a book that was written that I keep on my bookshelf in about 1972 or 1973 by a reporter from Detroit called Cities Destroyed for Cash, the scandal at FHA. And it was just documenting the corruption that occurred at FHA during these programs. The 235 program is the specific program that was largely involved. In terms of the down payment assistance, as I mentioned, there would first of all be an increase of 3.6% in all of the areas that these first-time buyers receiving this assistance would be price setters. How do we know that? Well, we've studied other times that the federal government has made changes that allows us to measure this impact. In particular, in 2015, when FHA lowered its mortgage insurance premium from 135 basis points to 85 basis points, we had a similar experiment. Certain people, FHA borrowers, were getting extra buying power. The other people in the market did not, because they were not affected by the decline in the premium. We then could study the impact on home prices, and we found that that impact was substantial and it was widespread. That again, this price setter impact occurred. We also know then we can calculate what the total cost that would be spent on due to the increase in home prices, and that's the $175 billion that I mentioned. That's more than the cost of the program. But that money's going directly to existing home buyers. That would perpetuate a practice that Congress has had of providing demand side subsidies, which then go directly to benefit the existing home buyers, not the first-time buyers they're intended to help.
Mr. Salmon, you testified that this nation's fiscal situation is very bad. We will pay more interest payments on our national debt than the cost of all housing assistance over the next 10 years. Vice President Harris proposed to increase federal spending, which means the national debt will continue to grow. So for you, would piling on even more federal spending drive up interest rates and make the goal of home ownership even less attainable?
Thank you, Senator Grassley. So more government spending deficits and debt will make this situation worse. We know from the economic literature on debt and economic growth that more debt impacts living standards in several ways, one of which is crowding out private investment, which means lower wage growth, means less job creation. One of which you mentioned is higher interest rates. About 1% increase in the debt ratio is correlated with about a 3 or 4 basis point increase in interest rates. And of course, these interest rates have a causal effect on mortgage rates, so that dries up the cost of home ownership in that respect. Another way is through higher future distortionary taxes, which aren't good for economic growth and development. And then finally, the one that we've become familiar with in recent years is inflation. We essentially inflate away the debt, but at the same time, we inflate away the purchasing power of American families to save.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Senator Grassley. We now turn to Senator Kane, followed by Senator Braun.